Hey everyone, it's Casey Rain from The Violet Reality. St. Paul Peterson was in the UK this week, and after an absolutely incredible show in London, we caught up with him for an episode of Uncovering Prince. Check out part 1. Hey everyone, it's The Violet Reality. My name is Casey Rain. I'm here with my partner Kim Camellia for another episode of your favorite show, Uncovering Prince. Today, our special guest is the one and only St. Paul Peterson. How you doing, Paul?
Nice to be here. Thanks for taking time to come over to the Hotel here in London.
Let's take it all the way back to the very beginning. So we all know that you came from a musical family in Minneapolis. So when was the first time you actually heard one of Prince's songs?
Probably would have been on the radio, when I was in high school. He had released his first couple of records, and 1999 was making a splash, and that was really, I think, one of the first pop singles he had. I could be mistaken about that, but that was the first one when I started going, who is this guy? And he's from Minneapolis. Whoa, this is some great music. So that's really when I got invested in his music, was while I was in high school.
How did you go about getting an audition to be in The Time, and how much of their music did you know before that?
I had just graduated from high school, and I went on vacation with my best friend at the time, Brett Ward. We went up to a place called Breezy Point, and my brother-in-law, his name is Stuart Pastor. Now, see if you can follow this. There'll be a quiz. Stuart Pastor is Bobby Z's first cousin. Stuart Pastor is also my brother-in-law. So he knew something was going on with The Time, and he heard that through Bobby, I would suppose, I'm kind of guessing on this, that there was a vacancy to be filled in The Time. So he called me on vacation and said, Paul, get your butt home right now. You have an audition with The Time. So I had to cut my vacation short. I went home. I was supposed to receive a cassette at my mom's house and have ample time to learn however many songs they wanted me to learn. Of course, the tape never came. Tape finally comes, and they say, your audition's tomorrow. So I don't know whether that was my first test or not, whether I could be prepared, but I sat in my mother's basement, learned all those songs, repeated them a million times, and I knew I had to be able to memorize them and be able to try to move and be cool, which was impossible in those days when I'm 17, just long and lanky, if you remember, what I looked like in The Time. And then I went in for the audition, and we can talk about that later. But as far as The Time's music, I wasn't as familiar with that. But of course, 777 9311 I knew about, and that still is one of my favorite tracks. I mean, of course, that drum beat, everybody has to play that. Whenever I come into a room, all my drummer friends say, hey, St. Paul's here. Yeah, okay. You got that high part wrong. Anyways, so that's when I got familiar with them. I've known of those records because I was a big fan of black community radio called KMOJ in the day, and it wasn't a conscious decision. Hey, I'm going to listen to black music. No, we are a jazz family. We grew up playing jazz. We love funk and R&B, and that's the station I gravitated towards. And they really supported the Minneapolis music scene, and they always have.
It kind of feels like the original incarnation of The Time with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. They were a very sort of tight unit. Was there any kind of weird feeling once you did get into the band that kind of like some of the band members were upset that Jam and Lewis had been let go and there was new people coming in and it was changing and Morris didn't really have the control that he wanted to have? Was there tension?
Probably tension. Yeah, I would say. But when you're 17, you don't give about what's going on. I was not privy to what they had been through. I didn't know the politics that were going on. I didn't realize that people were fired. I'm a kid out of high school. You don't investigate that stuff when you're a kid. You just go, oh, yeah, I can play keyboards and I can dance. And you don't necessarily pay attention to why you're stepping into those roles until much later. Probably a lot of weirdness for everybody who was there prior to me. I mean, Jesse, Jerome, Jelly Bean, Morris for sure. But for me, it was an opportunity for me to grow musically so quickly. I had already grown up in a musical family, and they were my mentors and my teachers. And then when I stepped into this role, it was a completely different type of education for me. And I really was a little oblivious to the bad vibes, if there were any. I can tell you that Jelly Bean took me under his wing immediately. That's just who he is, and I love you, big brother. He always takes care of me all the time. To this day, he's my biggest supporter. He really is. And Jesse and I got tight. He was the taskmaster at that time, and I hated him, and I loved him, and I hated him, and I hate you. I love you, Jesse. So we literally were almost roommates, and we got along that well. So, but that, once the movie had come and all that, and everybody broke up, and then I started to realize what all that was about, because then you start to ask questions. And during that time, things were moving so fast. We were doing movies and doing records, and it was nuts. So I totally understand why Jam and Lewis are always pictured as those guys, because they are those guys. They are the original Time. I respect that. I get it. I feel fortunate that I was on the most successful Time album that exists. No one can take that away from me, and I'm proud of that. But who's the keyboard player at the time? Jam, Monty Moyer. I give it up to them, as well I should. That's their chair, and I'm glad they were able to get back together, and I'm happy, to give that up to them.
So when the movie's being filmed, when Purple Rain's being filmed, and you got all these scenes at First Avenue, we sort of heard that Morris's relationship with Prince is already basically like over at this point. Like they're just not friends anymore. They've just really come to a head, and it's just not working. And Morris kind of knows that he's going to leave, and he's not really showing up to rehearsals. And then eventually he does leave when the movie's out. He goes to LA and does his thing. But there was a sort of brief period right after he's gone where we've heard that Prince wanted to continue the Time, maybe with Jesse being the front man, and maybe bring some more people in without Morris, basically. And is that true?
One of those things that I didn't ask questions on. I had not heard that. I've heard rumor to that. That could very well be true. The thing that I remember is, and what I was told during that period of time was, Morris left. Time was no longer. Then at that period of time, Prince would just invite us out. Those who decided to stay, Jesse decided to go. So evidently, they may have had that conversation. I was not privy to that conversation. There was a discussion of when we all sat around in a circle, and it's a little fuzzy as to the timeline of all this, but Prince came to us in this little warehouse that was in Eden Prairie, and he said, well, Morris is gone. Jesse's gone. Who wants to stay? We're going to do a new band, and you're going to be the lead singer. And he pointed at me. And that's what I remember from that. I don't necessarily remember any conversation, or was I privy to any conversation about the Time continuing with Jesse being the front man. I think at that point of time, things were everybody wanted to sign someone from Minneapolis. So I'm sure there was a few more zeros attached to Jesse's offer than Prince was going to offer him. And that's just the way it was, man. So, I think things worked out for the better for me. I mean, selfishly speaking, that was a pretty incredible day when he pointed at me and said, you're going to be the lead singer. I mean, obviously it was Susanna, so pretty cool.
What do you remember about shooting Purple Rain?
Purple Rain we almost started shooting that immediately, if I remember correctly. Well, we rehearsed a bunch, starting in, I guess that was June, and then we would rehearse 6 days a week, many, many, many hours a day. We did one gig that they recorded, and that's where you get the bird from. That's on the record. I think it's me. I don't think they replaced me, but I'll never know. Did you replace me? Did y'all replace me on that? Jesse, you can answer that for me. Sounds like me. Might not be me. Not sure. Anyway, Purple Rain. Okay, so the first thing that I remember is having to show up for the rehearsal scene with Apollonia 6 at that warehouse, where Morris is sitting there like this. Our bass player at the time, Rocky Garrity, didn't show up. Evidently, his alarm didn't go off or something happened, because I was carting him back and forth to rehearsals during that point in time. His kids were small, and then I had a car, and whatever. But anyways, he didn't show up, so we got another bass player. It was freezing. We were shooting all those scenes. I remember that so fondly, just being so green, just going where they told me to go. And we didn't know that was going to become the monster it became. It just was another day of work. It really was. And then, all these concert scenes that we go to First Avenue for, they were handing out cigarettes to smoke, to create smoke in the club, because it was back in the 80s. And I was like, cool, cigarettes. Cigarettes. Really. And that was the scene. And just really, really, really fun. I mean, I had... we just watched it. It is a funny story. I'm a marathon runner, not a very fast one, but I'm a marathon runner, and we have a runner's retreat. And of course, all my friends wanted to watch Purple Rain, and I hadn't watched Purple Rain in so long, completely all the way through it. And I brought my Purple Rain suit that I still have, that's in perfect condition, and I put one of my running brothers in it because I don't fit in. The right leg doesn't fit in anymore. So he came out. I'll show you the picture. It's fantastic. So I have nothing but fantastic memories of that whole thing. And then, of course, going to the premiere, I snuck my then girlfriend with me. I couldn't tell my mom because I was living with my mother at the time, very Catholic woman, and I didn't want to disrupt that whole thing. Respect to her. So she was with me, so we avoided the cameras. Every time there was a camera, so there's no footage. So was I really there or was I not really there? Yes, I was there. But we had to avoid the cameras because I didn't want my mom to get mad, So she has now been my wife for 29 years. Julie, I love you, baby. I love you. Honey, I love you after 29 years. I love you. That's my next new single.
How long did the sessions take recording the Family album, and what are some of the memories that you have around doing that?
I remember getting the cassettes delivered to my mom's house because I'm still living with Mom, right? I'm maybe 20 at that point. I'd listen to the music, have to learn the parts, verbatim. That's exactly how it was. You've heard the Prince versions of the Family songs, and you heard my versions of the Family songs, and they are darn close. That was my job. So I'd shed them and I'd go in. But to answer your question, I thought I was going to go and sing them and go home in an hour. That was not the case. I remember one time, I think, and it might have been a time rehearsal, Prince came up to us and said, "You better call your girlfriends. We're going to be here all night. You ain't got time for date night. We're going to be here a long time." But Prince wasn't necessarily there for all the vocal sessions. It was mostly David Z, who, again, we go back to Stuart Pastor. That's also his first cousin. More family. So David would be there, and it was David's job to know the vocal better than me. To help me do my best to get the emotion, the sound quality, all those different things that Prince brought to the party. He was creating an entity, and this is what the entity was supposed to sound like, and that was David's job and my job to bring that to the party. So it wasn't Paul Peterson going in, "Hey, but that beautiful love song I just did for my wife." It wasn't that guy. It was a particular character that he wanted me to play, because a lot of Prince's bands are like movies or parts, right? You were that guy. We're creating that part for you there. My part in the time was a young David Bowie guy. Yeah. My part in the Family was like a, smooth kind of movie star, old school kind of a classy, but funky dude, right? So, I mean, he had very, very particular parts for me to play. And, I really didn't put that into words until many, many years later. I just thought I was going to go in and sing. That was not the case. So it took quite a long time.
You mentioned that your job was to replicate what Prince had done on the tracks that he recorded as closely as possible. But most of those demos have, come out one way or another over the years. We heard Nothing Compares to You, of course, last year, finally officially released the Prince's original vocal. But then there's the one song on the Family record that Bobby wrote, River Run Dry. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing that Prince didn't do a vocal for that because he didn't write the song. So how did you go about recording the vocal for that one? Do you remember? Oh, and also we've heard that Bobby's original demo sounded more like Gary Newman. Do you remember that?
You guys know way more about this stuff than I do. Quite frankly, I don't remember. I don't think Prince put a vocal on that at all. Well, actually, he changed the words, so he may have. I don't have a clear memory of whether he put a vocal on that or not, to be honest with you. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But I know that he had some different words that he put in there. So it was a complete demo with drums and the whole bit. It was, I think he kept Bobby's kick drum. Boom, boom, go, go, go. But it was, have you heard the demo? Have you heard any of that?
Bobby's demo. I don't think it's out there. I don't think Bobby's demo is so.
What can I do about that? Bobby, people should hear that. He's great. He and I used to work a bunch together, too, after that all happened. We'd do a bunch of artists. He had me play keyboards with Boy George.
Ooh, wow. Nice.
It was crazy. But I wish I knew the answer to that. I can't recall. It's too far back. Too many brain cells. Gone by the wayside.
Why didn't Feline make the cut?
You know, I'm not sure. It could be something to do with respect to my mom. You know, talking about that kind of stuff. I know my mom would have gone out to the warehouse and kicked Prince's little butt. Mom used to say, she's Prince is naughty. I'm going to spank him when I meet him. So, I mean, I don't know the exact decision on that, but have you ever heard my version of that? Okay, good. It's ridiculously funky.
It is, yeah.
That track is unbelievable. And didn't it turn into Holly Rock basically after that? Yeah. Sort of, kind of, they all kind of go together. But I'm glad he kept bits of that for another song. But I don't know the ultimate decision, but I'd like to say that it was out of respect for my mom.
So moving forward from the family, we've heard that when Prince first started working on Under the Cherry Moon and he first flew out to France to start the filming on that he also flew you out to LA to do like acting lessons for a potential other film project that he wanted to do. Do you remember anything about what that project was, or did you hear about it, or was it just like, here's some acting lessons?
Excellent question. No, it was basically a need-to-know basis. I'm sure he shared it with other people, probably Susanna. I've gotten a lot of information from her because they were an item at the time. I had no idea why I was out doing what I was doing. I was assuming I was being groomed for a movie. I was assuming that. I mean, he paid for acting, singing, dancing lessons, all these things. Very interesting stuff. Me going and they're trying to make this poor white boy graceful and move and funky and cool, and I was just lanky and wrong. But it was. I think it was for a potential movie. But at that point in time, I had no knowledge of what it was going to become at all.
What do you remember from your decision to leave the family and the phone call that you had with Prince when you told him?
No comment. That was probably one of the most interesting days of my life. It was an incredibly hard decision for me, obviously. I mean, I was groomed to be my own artist by my family my entire life. Prince happened to come along, and that opportunity was part of my experience and part of my journey, right? But I believed in myself that I could do the same thing on a different scale, or not necessarily a different scale, but in a different way. And these opportunities were presented to me that I had to look at. So I did. And to decide to leave the highest grossing artist of the day was a very tough decision. I mean, my family went, what in the hell are you doing? But they stood behind me, but they were like, are you sure you want to open this can of worms? And I was like, I think I do. But it takes a great deal of belief in yourself, because I knew what was coming. It was not going to be a lot of fun. And it was not a lot of fun he didn't make it fun for a long time. And I regret the way that was done. My representation at the time chose to leave in a way that I wouldn't do now that I'm a grown man. It wasn't as respectful as I'd like it to have been. It was basically, bye, see you later, I got no contract, and goodbye. Instead of, we're presented with an opportunity here. You know, there's many different ways it could have played out, but that was the path I chose. I don't necessarily love that path. I was able to tell Prince that many, many, many years later. I was able to rectify that situation and speak with him about those things and let bygones be bygones and tell him how much I appreciated being a part of that and how he had helped my family. And really, we worked our way back from some pretty shitty times, you know, and that was, you know, it was a growth period for me. And it was also, you know, when you're a young man, you need representation. How do you know if you've got the right representation? This is a word to the artists out there. You young people, be careful who you trust. Yeah. Be careful who's your voice. It's a very, very tough decision for who's going to represent you, and make sure you got the right people. And I did not necessarily have the right person for that job at that time. So it was tough, but, you know, we made it through. We ended up going with MCA Records and Gerald Busby with a very sizable offer at the time, and put out some great records.
Yeah. So we heard that it's actually you playing on the track that's called For Love on Jill Jones's debut album on Paisley Park Records, but you're actually never credited for it. Is that true that you were playing on that?
Which track?
For Love.
For Love?
We did a lot of recording around that time, and I have no idea what was used where or why or when. I just don't. They could have morphed into different things. I just don't know. Good to know, though. Thanks for letting me. Maybe I should add that name to my list of credits. You learn something new every day, everybody. Jill, tell me.
You and your brother Ricky worked on Javetta Steele's album in 1990 at Paisley Park. Prince pulled out 2 tracks from the vault for that record, a track called And How and Skip to My You, My Darling.
Okay.
Do you remember working on those, and do you remember if you had the original like Prince demos of those to work with? Because they were recorded years prior, and I'm wondering how that came about.
Ricky was the producer on that, and he would bring me into a situation where either we'd recut or we would re-overdub on things. So I wasn't privy to what existed before. I wasn't sure what was pre-existing, pardon me, or whether he overdubbed something. And then I would come in and I'd play either bass or guitar. Usually I would play bass or guitar or do some programming. So, no, I'm not sure exactly what was pre-existing. I love Javetta and I love the Steeles because they're my second family. They are.
On your first couple of solo albums that you did, I know you worked again with Monty from the time on some of that stuff. He was co-producer on some of that stuff. How did you reconnect after you've been away from obviously the time for quite a few years at that point? Was it just like Minneapolis vibes, or was it like a specific decision? Oh, it was good working with him and I'd like to do that again.
We had never really worked together because he was out doing stuff with Jam and Lewis. I basically replaced him in the time, so we really didn't have a chance to form a working relationship. But after I left the fold, I think my representation at that time suggested to work with him, and I was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." We got along wonderfully, and we wrote some really good stuff. I mean, Monty is incredibly talented. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but not only is he a mensch, great guy, but he's also incredibly talented and such interesting lyrics and musical ideas, and it just fit perfectly into what I was doing at that time. And I would love to work with him again. Monty, did you hear that? I'm making a new record. Let's go back and do it again. In fact, where we were working back in those days on my record in 85, 86, something like that, whatever you'll know the year. Tell me the year. We were working in the same studio that I'm in right now with my brother Ricky. Yeah, so we did a lot of records there. My record, Paula Abdul's record, so many different records. But, yeah, Monty's just great. He really is.
So around this time, sort of early 90s, working at Paisley, where your brother Ricky's producing stuff and you're doing stuff that ends up on records by like Mavis Staples and Howard Hewitt and these kind of stuff, generally like working from stuff that Prince had pulled out that he'd written over the years. Did you have, when did you first have another interaction with him from going back out to work on tracks at Paisley and clear the air? Like at what point did you clear the air with him?
When Ricky was hired out there, Ricky invited me to play on a bunch of records, right? And on the second floor of Paisley, he had an office right next to Brother Dwayne, right next door. So I would show up, and somehow I gradually weaseled my way into the office, just like little brothers do. Isn't that right, big bro? So he and I were inseparable at that point in time. We're incredibly close now, but literally we lived within a mile of each other. We worked every day with each other. We were going everywhere. So he invited me to come in and hang and record, and I did. And Prince was there. He knew I was there. He very easily could have had me removed, which he's done many times to other people. We were not on speaking terms at that point in time, but I was playing on all those records because Ricky and I, we were inseparable at musically speaking, and I worked on all his productions during that time. I remember one funny interaction where I think I stepped out of the office and Prince was coming down from his apartment. He saw me like this, held like this, and he went. Can you just see him doing that? Yeah. And I was like, okay. So, things weren't great. So Ricky and I went off to make the David Sanborn record in 96. And Ricky found out his contract was not going to be extended. So we were going to have to go clean the room out and do all that kind of stuff. And it was, melancholy. And it was like, okay, I guess we're done here. And we made a lot of great records at Paisley during that time. And we were there every day, every night. We were hanging out all the time. So when we finally cleared out the office, I went home and I was married and had 2 kids. Wrote a letter to him just to say, you know what, man, I just want to let you know that I know you could have kicked me out of the office a long time ago, or out of Paisley a long time ago. We haven't had the best relationship, and I apologize for that. And I want to let you know I love playing on all these records, and I appreciate what you've done for me and what you've done for my family, Ricky. And it was closure for me. It was just like, dude, man up and write the letter. So I did. And I was just like, you need to put that behind you, and you need to thank the people who were instrumental in your success. So I did that. And I was like, I'm done. Wash my hands of it. Thank you, Prince. Next. Except I got a phone call the next day. It said, Prince wants to see you. I'm like, wow, okay, cool. All right, so here I get dragged back in, which is fine. I go up to his office. He lets me sit in the office for a little while to let me stew and get nervous. And basically what he said is that, I'm putting a new band together, and would you be interested in joining it? I'm like, tell me more. He said, well, first of all, it's going to be an all-meatless band because it was the mad cow disease deal back in those days. He's like, that mad cow disease is going to get you, so you can't eat meat. And I'm like, no, man. No. And we laughed, and he said, oh, you're going to be like Michael Bland. Let's go discuss it over a steak, huh? And I said, yeah, that's basically it. I just thanked him, hugged him, and I left. And that was it. And that was the start of our road back to being civil to each other and being nice to each other. And, our relationship grew years after that. And when we were starting to make the fDeluxe record, he called me out to the office again, and he was like, well, you can't call it the family. You're missing the most important person in the whole band. You know whose lyrics those were, whose songs those were? Those are mine. How can you call it the family? I was like, got it. We're just trying to continue the legacy. He said, you can't continue the legacy without me. I like, what would that look like? I swear to God, I was like, cool. Well, let's do something. And we had talked about re-releasing the family record and adding a couple of other songs. That was our last conversation about that topic. Then we would, I'd call him from time to time. He was impossible to get a hold of. He's like, why don't you just call me? I'm like, give me your phone number. I don't have a phone. So I'd find a way to get a hold of him. And I'd say, look, I'm going down to see Victor Wooten tonight. Let's go hang out. And he'd show up. And we'd hang out and we'd talk and we had great chats. And really towards the end of his life, the last 3-4 years, we were incredibly civil and had a nice relationship. And that's how I'm glad it went out.
Thanks for watching. That's it for the first part of our interview with St. Paul Peterson. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss part 2 when it goes live soon. There's a few more dates left on Paul's You Got to Love tour. Make sure you check out paulpeterson.com for all the info.
Hi, I'm Elisa Fiorillo, and you're watching The Violet Reality on YouTube. All things Prince.